So without further ado, we're going to jump right into the talk today by our esteemed guest and EFL author, Mr. James Suntres. And let me see if I can get James up here to take over. So give me one moment, everybody. Where are you, James?
Can you see me?
I think James is with us.
Yeah, can you hear me? Can you see me?
I can hear you.
Can everybody else hear me? Yes, we can. Yes, sure, yes.
Here you are, James. I see you.
Okay, good. So,
Okay.
well, I'm pretty nervous myself, to be honest with you. This is my first digital presentation, as it were, but we'll try and hopefully not make a mess of things.
I think we're all newbies here then.
We're all newbies. All of us are newbies. Yeah, we're all newbies. So I think I'd like to, I guess, open up my my presentation. I want to thank all of you for setting aside your time and to get this really important information. And you will have an opportunity to ask questions. And at the end of the presentation, do have some resources and some references that'll help you as well. So without further ado, let me just launch my presentation, I guess, eh?
Sounds good. And I'm here to support you, James.
Okay, thanks. Let me see if I can find it first of all. Yep, it's on. So let me just see if I can share my screen.
Great.
As I said, my name is James Suntres, and I've been involved with the ECCE, ECPE language teaching since like a long time. And I'm here to talk to you about the changes to the ECCE, ECPE. My subtitle is Increased Emphasis on Discourse and Pragmatics. And this is something that hopefully, well, I'm going to try to explain as we go along. But for as far as the ECCE and the ECPE are concerned, the emphasis has always been on discourse and pragmatics, especially since the first major changes which took place in the early 2000s. So beginning with the benefits of the changes, they've made, and this is especially true for the ECPE, but it's also valid for the ECCE. They've made it more accessible for younger learners. They've designed it for younger learners. The test-taking population has been getting younger and younger over the years for both examinations and for all examinations for that matter. I haven't seen anybody as young as 5 taking the exams yet, but it won't surprise me if we do. I'm being facetious, obviously. But yeah, the learners are younger, especially for the ECP, and this is reflected in the content. I'm going to give you an example of this shortly. There's a more coherent progression as well from the ECCE to the ECPE. Both examinations now start with the writing. Both examinations have almost identical listening activities, a slight change in the reading comprehension, but they're more similar than they are different, which of course wasn't the case in the past. There's also improved coverage. By the way, these first 4 points are taken verbatim from the CAMLA website. So at CAMLA, they say that the exam offers improved coverage, and they state more testing of pragmatics and increased intertextualization. By pragmatics, from our perspective as teachers, this means our students should be learning the language to communicate and not for its own sake. I'll explain what I mean by that shortly. As I said, an increased intertextualization implies that it's assumed that in doing the reading comprehension, for example, or the listening, students do have some sort of background knowledge. They're not a blank slate, and attempts are made to assume this background knowledge, activate it, and because this is part of the reading process after all. And there's increased efficiency in the sense that there are fewer items. These last 2 points I've added myself as a teacher. The text types and the task types allow for more effective teaching using the practice exams. Like this has been the case for the last 20 years even, but it's even more so now that the test tasks also lend themselves to teach what is being tested. So we have the two elements. Actually, there are three elements. There's teaching, there's testing, and there's language use. Imagine a triangle where in each apex there's a testing, there's teaching, and there's use. And now we have these three things even more closely, these three elements even more closely related. And also, very important, the test task can be used more effectively as a springboard for practice in all or other language skill areas. By this, I mean speaking activities can generate writing, writing activities can generate speaking, etc. This, of course, is a seminar it's a seminar, a separate seminar. But I'm going to give you a couple of brief examples how this applies. As far as ECCE now, the changes are not really that significant. The exam begins with the writing. In the past, the writing was at the end. Now they've CAMLA placed the writing in the beginning, and the topics have been upgraded to be to reflect more current trends. I think that the writing is at the beginning now. Well, the rationale for putting the writing at the end was students would be exposed to all this language, and it was thought that this would facilitate the writing process. I guess the realization was that students were so, they were probably fatigued by the end of the examination, and the writing became actually more challenging. Maybe this was why, but also so that it is in tandem with the ECPE. We have a reduced number of items, 15 grammar and 15 vocabulary items, but the type of grammar and the type of vocabulary items has not changed. And part 2 listening is heard twice. Now, it's here where I want to stress something. So yeah, well, we hear the parts of listening twice. Yay, great, the exam is easier. No, it's not easier. The rationale is that, so again, this is a reflection of how we actually use language. So when we listen to something now, more often than not, we're listening to something which has been pre-recorded on YouTube or a podcast. You hear something you haven't quite understood, you weren't paying attention. What do? You just scroll back or rewind, or you go back to what you didn't understand, you re-listen. And basically, that's what we always do. So not having, not hearing something a second time, it's not, it's perhaps that's where it's not natural. So students can hear it a second time. But I argue that if a student is really good and, at their level, hearing it a second time just gives that student an opportunity to consolidate and confirm something that he or she already knows. If a student, though, is, not competent enough, not really ready for the exam, even if that student were to hear it 2, 3, 4, 5 times, they still would not get it. I think that this benefits students who are, like, say, at a borderline level, who, just, not really quite passing, but not failing either. These students are facilitated, I'll admit. So maybe if students are at a borderline, it might make it a little more manageable, but I would not say that, oh, it's easier now. It still continues to be challenging. What remains unchanged? The speaking test remains unchanged. The task types continue to be the same throughout the examination. And the level of difficulty is reflective of B2 level, independent user, brief description here. The independent user on the basis of the Common European Framework, references, ability to understand main ideas of complex text on both concrete and abstract topics, etc., etc. I'm not going to tire you with this is just the general description of what a B2 is, but of course, it's much more elaborate than this. And I encourage you to download the CFR if you've not done so already. I've provided a link where you can access it. We cannot hear anything, dear. Oh boy. Let's see. You cannot. Can you hear me now?
James, we can hear you. Don't worry.
Loud and clear.
Keep
Sure,
going.
I can hear you now. Okay, great.
Keep going, keep
Great,
going.
good. I don't know. Did you hear what did you hear the slide? Somebody respond. Just talked about where the ECCE is the same. Did you hear that? About how the ECCE is not where the ECCE has not changed? Yes. Okay. Yes, James. Okay. Great. Perfect. Okay. So I continue. Now the ECPE changes, and here we have, of course, the greatest changes. First of all, a change in the writing section. It includes visuals now, charts, graphs, ads, notices, etc., which must be referred to in the writing task. Actually, I've got an example of that. By the way, if you go to the CAMLA website, you'll be able to download a complete ECCE, a complete ECPE, the audio files, everything, answer key, everything is there. After our seminar today, go to CAMLA website, download this. I mean, it's free, so you can have it. But we also have our own revised books, which do have the changes. As I said, the writing now also includes visual prompts. The test takers have 45 minutes to complete the writing task. This isn't, more time to write. It's because they have more information to process before they start writing. That's why they have the 45 minutes instead of the 30. Actual writing time is more or less the same. Which website for the sample papers? Just go to CAMLA and just Google CAMLA and it'll take you straight there, or michiganassessment.org, and you'll find them. On CAMLA, they have a complete ECCE and ECPE. Somebody says, will any test material be offered? Now, to go on, part one of the listening, we have 20 short conversations followed by one question with 4 possible answer choices instead of 3. In the old format, there were 3 possible answer choices, but now there are 4 possible answer choices. Part 2 of the listening, we have, which is a new activity, we have 3 short talks, heard only once, which are similar to those on the ECCE. Announcements, introductions, presentations, etc., followed by 6 questions, each of which has 4 possible answer choices. And part 3 of the listening includes a new format for the second presentation. So in part 3 of the listening, we have 2 presentations. The one presentation has the same format as before. The new presentation has a new format, which again, I'll describe. And the questions in the longer listening do not always follow the sequence of information in the presentation/talks, which is why perhaps we should encourage our students to start taking notes. More about that in just a sec. Candidates can still choose the essay and not the one with the charts. Well, no, actually, you'll see, I'm going to show you right now that the 2 essay questions both refer to the visuals, and students are encouraged, I'll show you that, are encouraged to take information from the visuals, which is right here, as a matter of fact. So here we have the visual, and let me just, okay, there we go. So here we have an example of the new writing. I just wanted to give you some time to look at these charts. Yes, the scoring will remain the same. The scoring has not changed. Okay, so notice we have the one visual about trends in e-commerce, how they're increasing. The second visual about how due to technology jobs are lost, and the third visual how a business owner deals with customers who are upset because they don't offer same-day delivery. And so current problems, the sorts of things that we encounter in the media, worries that people have, how technology is affecting the job market, and trends in e-commerce, etc. So the first topic, delivery company in your city is planning to start using robots to deliver packages to homes and businesses. Many people are concerned about this idea. Write an article for a local news website. Explain the impact of the delivery company's decision and what you think about it. Include at least one piece of information given to support your response. So there you go. In dealing with the topic, you have to take one piece of information from the one of the three prompts. And the second topic, I'm not going to tire you with reading it, but basically it's the same thing. As far as IELTS, yeah, it is very similar to IELTS. I think one thing that I want to stress is it's still the Michigan ECP continues to be a reflection of academic writing. The same types of formats apply. That has not changed. The rubric has changed, but basically it's example of academic writing, and that has not changed at all. Okay, that has not changed at all. But like I said, this is a seminar on its own, and perhaps if there is interest, we can do a seminar on writing on the ECPE and the ECCE, and give some ideas on how to use the rubrics effectively. But and one thing, going back to what I said earlier, in brainstorming for this part of the exam, and students talking about responding, well, how are we going to deal with this, that sort of thing, how do we understand these rubrics, and exchanging these ideas are actually using a lot of the functions they'll be using in the speaking part. So that's an example of how one section of the exam prepares for the other, and also how the writing can generate language use in other language skill areas. Yeah, seminar on ECCE and ECPE writing would be great. Yeah, well, maybe we can plan one. Now, I talk about pragmatics all the time, and here's an example. I'm going to give you a couple of examples of pragmatics. This from part one of the listening on the ECPE. You can see this. You can hear this, the audio to this. So, guy talking to this girl. Sarah, did you realize there's a hole in your tote bag? The woman sighs. Oh, don't get me started. Oh, what happened? My roommate decided to get a dog. Well, Buster, that's his name, chews on everything. He likes leather best. Oh, dear. How does a woman feel? So here's the interesting thing. Don't get me started, upset. That's a lexical connection right there. Whenever anybody says anything, so what do you think about this? Well, don't get me started, bus service in the city is really deteriorated. Oh, don't get me started. Prices in the supermarket have gone sky high. Oh, don't get me started. So it's like immediate response. Yeah, well, that means yeah, because if I get started about just complaining, because I really, this really sucks and I hate it. So don't get me started. That alone, and then the word upset, you don't even have to read the other answer choices if you're savvy and you understand that pragmatics involved. Also, I encourage you to read to listen to the audio. You can see her sarcasm and her angst, if you will, comes through. So pragmatics is not only structural, but also tone of the language and the context and that sort of thing. That's pragmatics, or an example thereof. So is this teachable? Again, another seminar, but this is I just wanted to show you that to give you an example of what we mean by pragmatics as far as the test is concerned. But it deserves it having a leather. Yeah, true. Dogs love leather. And here's another example of pragmatics. This is from the grammar. I wasn't able to get blank sooner, but it really wasn't an urgent message. I think that's it. So here we have back from you, back for you, back to you. Of course, the obvious, I wasn't able to get back to you sooner. Correct answer choice. But here's the interesting thing. So if you look at, I wasn't able to get sooner, and stop right, just ignore the second half of the sentence. I wasn't able to get back from you sooner. I wasn't able to get you back sooner, back for you sooner. Arguably, these three adjectives are not totally wrong. You don't really know what is right or what is wrong unless you read the whole statement. I wasn't able to get back to you sooner, meaning I wasn't able to respond. Now, I argue that in order to understand the correct answer choice, students have to be able to contextualize this statement. They have to understand, well, when would you use to get back to someone? It's about a message. So is this, although this is a grammar section, it's, you know, more language use than grammar per se. And in order to really understand this, if you're in the classroom, you have to understand this concept of getting back to somebody, you know, responding to an earlier message. So here's another example of pragmatics to help you, and hopefully with these two examples, and then, you know, you can just go through the exam yourself and find more examples. And maybe this might be a good exercise for your students too. You know, going through this. Well, which of these items do you have to understand? You know, how to use language in order to answer them. It's not simply knowing a grammar rule, you know, as it were. Now, ECPE change again, part 2, important details. Both formal and somewhat less formal registers are used. There are elements of real extended discourse, you know, false starts, pauses as the speaker gathers his or her thoughts, digressions, attempts at humor. So it's pretty. You know, attempts are made to make it as natural as possible. Again, you can look at the transcripts once you've downloaded them and see this. I've included, you know, example here from the ECPE made available. Hi everybody, like Ms. Jones said, I went to Yellowstone National Park for my vacation. I was with my family, etc., etc. It was a blast. You know, a little, you know, informal use there. The best way to give you a sense of how big and beautiful it is to show you some videos I took on. I'll play those in a bit. First, a few details about the park, blah, blah, blah. First national park in the United States, you know, hold on a second, I lost my place, aha. And actually in this particular, you'll see this, and it happens a couple of times. So it just shows, you know, how natural it is. Also, interestingly, the reason why I chose this example, it's obviously a high school kid, you know, making a class presentation. I don't think somebody in university would say, like Ms. Jones said, I want to show you videos and photos from my family vacation. It's obviously some sort of high school project. Again, going back to what I said earlier, that they've tried, attempts have been made to make this exam more accessible to younger learners. Not only is, you know, and this is not reflected in the level of the language. The level of the language has not changed. It's still C2 level, but the context and the situation and the context are reflective of younger learners, something that a teenager can relate to. Part 3 now, the second talk, some important details. Now, part 3 of the listening, the first presentation has not changed. It continues to be a radio presentation. The format continues to be, you know, first step, like 6 steps. First step, announcer introduces the topic of the program. A reporter elaborates on what the announcer has said, introduces the expert who discusses the reporter's opening statement. Reporter asks for clarification. Expert provides us further clarification. And then the reporter concludes. Actually, the format of the first part of the listening, I've done this, you know, I did this a few years ago at a seminar. It's like presentation of an academic argument. You know, typically it has like presenter discusses a problem, reporter elaborates on this problem, expert provides a solution to the problem, reporter asks, well, what if the solution doesn't work? Expert will say, well, here's another solution to the problem. I have a problem, solution 1, solution 2. In the conclusion, the reporter said, well, you know, maybe the solution lies in combining both solutions, something to that effect. So just one example there. That has not changed. It's always, that was introduced a few years ago. It has not changed. The second talk in part 3, though, has. And actually, it continues to be interview with not one expert, but 2. And actually, it's a series of short exchanges reflecting more a conversation / interview with these 2 experts. There is a brief introduction. Announcer, again, makes a brief introduction. Then the reporter introduces the 2 experts. And after this briefly introducing the 2 experts, begins with a 4 or 5 turn exchange with expert 1. Okay, so announcer presents the program. Reporter, brief elaboration, introduces the 2 experts. Experts say, yeah, thanks for having us here, etc. And then the reporter has a 4 or 5 turn exchange with expert 1. Expert 2 doesn't talk. Then the reporter turns his or her attention to expert 2, asks a question. Expert 2 responds, and then expert 1 challenges expert 2 immediately, expresses some sort of disagreement, skepticism, tying in with the speaking. That's what happens between parts 4 and 5 of the speaking, right? Examiner 2 expresses skepticism, and the candidates have to respond to the skepticism. So same sort of functions, actually, another part of the exam. Again, this example of how one part of the exam relates to the other, and there's a lot of overlap. Expert 2 responds to the challenge question and then has a remaining 3 or 4 turn exchange with the interviewer. So there's a little more back and forth, but it's always clear who is speaking. Okay, one expert does not speak over the other. You never have, it's no arguing. There's no antagonism involved. What remains unchanged? Well, we have the same type of grammar and vocabulary, only a reduction in the number of items. The closed section remains unchanged. Of course, that was overhauled relatively recently. We have same types of reading passages, but there are 3 reading passages instead of 4, and there are 6 comprehension questions for each passage. And it is representative of the C2 level, proficient user, as defined in the Common European Framework, ability to understand with ease virtually everything heard and read, etc., etc. I'm not going to tire you with this. You can, I'm going to provide a link where you can download the Common European Framework, which has, and it's very important that you go through it as much as you can, because it really gives you an understanding of what a B2 level is and what a C2 level is. Not the most fascinating reading, though. It will cure you of insomnia, I assure you. So implications for the classroom. The reduced number of grammar and vocabulary items, with like the short discourse type items, means that on the exam itself, there's greater importance being given to extended discourse type items. So this means in the classroom, we should be giving more emphasis on language use as opposed to usage. This borrowing a term that Widdowson coined, back in the 80s, use meaning, actually using language to do things. Usage is, well, yeah, I can explain what a type 1 conditional is and what a type 2 conditional is. Yeah, I can explain it, but yeah, but that's an example of usage. What about using these things? Also, and this is explained in one of the articles I provided, that with grammar too, it's never just one grammar point which is at issue. There are a variety of things at play in any given even short discourse type grammar item. Yes, listening in ECP part 3 is heard only once. Plus, I think that in the classroom, we should be doing more open-ended activities where students function within the various spectra. This is to borrow a term by Michael Lewis, who talks about, one of the problems in classrooms, even to this day, I mean, certain certain habits die hard, you know, certain problems are very difficult to solve. It continues to be, maybe I'm wrong, you know, this dichotomous thing, like, you know, a student says something, well, am I right or am I wrong? Well, we shouldn't think of, whenever we're talking about language use, it's not dichotomous. And Michael Lewis uses the concept of spectra, like like an area of acceptability, of likelihood, of commutative power, etc. There are different spectra that Michael Lewis refers to, and I encourage you to get his book. It's still in print, and look it up. Also, we have to try and integrate various language structures in communication and make students understand how different language structures co-occur when we communicate. Most of the grammar books today do have that, I'll admit. But one thing we have to avoid, and I really like this, in doing my own homework for this presentation, because, you know, this concept of pragmatics kept on coming up. So I wanted to kind of like, refresh myself and see, okay, well, yeah, great, pragmatics, how does it apply in the classroom? Really great article. I provided the link for this article. And the authors, Bardovi, Harlig, and Dornay, said something about micro-level grammatical accuracy at the expense of macro-level pragmatic appropriateness. So again, if we're thinking in dichotomous terms, we've got to get that right answer. And we're doing like one practice test after another and seeing what right answer students have gotten, but not sitting down to explain why something is wrong, why something is right, to understand the context behind these utterances, then we're not really preparing our students, and we're doing them more of a disservice than anything else. Importance of note-taking and not transcribing. My wonderful colleague Terry will help me with this. Shout out to him. Because people misunderstand what note-taking is. Students, they start listening to something and they start writing out everything they hear, but no, note-taking is more than that. Note-taking is first of all, reading the comprehension question, getting an idea of, well, generally, what is this going to be about? Activating background knowledge, anticipating what you're going to hear, and looking at the comprehension questions, writing down keywords, ideas that relate to what I'm looking at. So basically, we're talking about guided note-taking. We're talking about combining reading, listening, and writing. Wide variety of skills, actually, to perform optimally on this part of the exam. And again, this is a separate seminar that I strongly encourage that we do. And very importantly, exploit the teaching potential of the test task to generate use, because ultimately, our purpose in the classroom is to get students to generate use, to generate their own language, not to simply respond to a course book or practice test book activity. They have to generate their own language, new language. I mean, that's what our goal should be. Anyway. So that's it. Here are my references and resources. I'll leave that up there. You can cut and paste these and just put them in Google search or wherever, and they'll just take you straight to these articles. Really like this article on do language learners recognize pragmatic violations, and pragmatic versus grammatical awareness. Very clear explanation of the problems, pragmatic versus grammatical problems in the EFL classroom. Common European Framework for Language, must have on your desktop. Corpus of Current American English, strongly recommend this site. All testing organizations, CAMLA, everybody uses this site. It's run by Brigham Young University. It's got over 1 billion words, and it's really fantastic. I've been using it for the longest time. Michael Lewis, Electoral Approach, a book was, came out about 30 years ago, but at the time it was well before its time. And a lot of the people scoffed at Lewis when he wrote that book, but I think it continues to adorn my desk. And this article here, Investigating Grammatical Knowledge at an Advanced Level. So the two of the writers, Walter and O'Boyle, actually work for CAMLA. They're test developers. And they talk about this, issue about grammatical knowledge. And what is grammatical knowledge at the advanced level? And again, this issue of pragmatics occurs. And in it, they talk about how students make a mistake, but students, you have 5 different students, they make the same mistake, but they've made it for 5 different reasons. So, how do you explain things to students? There's sometimes you can't really assume why people have made a mistake, and it's a lot more difficult to simply, they got this grammar rule wrong. So, thank you, and I hope I've been as clear as possible. I've given you, this is my email, James Suntres at HamiltonHousePublishers.com. If you have any questions, be more than happy to answer them. You can visit our site at Hamilton House Publishers. And these are our latest editions, ECCE, ECPE, practice test books that reflect the examination. And these books do reflect my own philosophy as a teacher in using the exams to generate learning and generate use. Thank you.
Thank you very much, James. That was a very interesting presentation, very insightful. We went a little bit over time, which is no problem at all. Now is the time where I think we can spend a few minutes and try out this little function that is very handy called Q&A. So I've noticed there's been a lot of questions throughout your presentation, and I want to ask everybody now if you have any questions.
Yes, I'm from Canada. I think you caught that A. I am from Canada.
Okay. So now I have opened up question and answer mode. So I think for all of you watching, you should have something in the chat box there. Okay, let's see. Digoni has asked a question. Let's go ahead and try this neat function.
Yes. So I go to Q&A mode, right? Myself?
I think you just hang out for a second, yeah. James. I think it'll show up for you. Oh, so many questions are coming in. I can't even click on it. There we go.
Yeah, so I have, could you please inform us about the topics on ECCE writing?
There we go. Boom.
Okay, yeah. So ECCE writing, I mean, the topics are, the general statement is they're topics that reasonably proficient, intermediate level student will be encountering in his or her everyday academic encounters life. So that's pretty broad, I know, but it's not going to be asked anything that requires expert knowledge. They're not going to be asked anything that requires, how can I say this? It's just everyday things that teenagers should be expected to know. Let's say, and I do have. Let's see. I have my articles here. There is an article. Did I bring it? Oh dear. So, anyways, here I'll tell you what you do. In the link that I've given you, the article written by the Boyle and Walters, etc. Actually, there are 3 things worth reading. Like there's one article about what they do to make the exam fair, and they have a description of what they do, the types of topics that they present in order to assure fairness. Fairness being something that a candidate is likely to encounter in everyday life, even in his or her own native culture. So I hope I've answered that. But if you go to that link, that article on advanced grammar, within that periodical, there's also an article which will answer your question. Is 65% the overall pass? So 65%, that's just, a very general number given to teachers and language school owners. Let's say about 65. The reason being is that let's not forget that the Americans love their psychometric testing. What this implies is that when an exam is administered, they always go back and they do their statistical evaluation. And yes, they do a lot of piloting with their examinations, et cetera, but an exam behaves differently with a pilot taking group of students, like 80, 90, 100 students that you piloted the exam with, and then you administer the same exam to 1,000 students. It will behave differently. I don't want to become too technical with you. So what happens is, if they see that a particular item based on their statistical outcome is easier or more difficult than what they thought, then this means the passing mark might be, for a particular exam, might be 63% or might be 66%. So, but for the sake of our students, just so they have an idea, we say 65. But the actual number might fluctuate, but I mean, there's no other way you can really do this, because this is a psychometric test, item response theory, where each and every individual item is looked at. Okay, so that's why. Yes, it does. ECP speaking stays the same. It has not changed. It has not changed. ECE listening questions. Do they follow the sequence? No, I said that they don't follow the sequence of the presentation. No, which is why, again, going back, note taking has become important now, and this is something we should look into. You mentioned something about changes in the rubric. If there are changes, are they mentioned in Canvas? Yes, they are. They are. In fact, you can download an entire ECCE ECPE with the change rubrics. Yes. Yes, we do have updated practice test books for both the ECCE and the ECPE.
You took my fire, James. I wanted to jump in and say, absolutely. We have the new updated test books in stock. So please get in touch with us at Hamilton House, either by getting in touch with us directly, contacting your local rep, and we'll be happy to get you some sample copies. So I think at this point, we're going to end today's session. It's been very, very informative for me, at least. I've learned a lot from you, James, and I appreciate you giving this presentation. I appreciate all the teachers and attendees today. And we are going to have a repeat seminar today at 4:30 p.m. Also on Saturday at 3 p.m. Okay, so don't worry if maybe I noticed some of you were saying that the audio wasn't so good. Sometimes there was issues with the video. So I want to thank you guys all for taking part in the very first pilot Hamilton House webinar. I want to thank you, James Suntres, for coming again. And
thank you.
We will see everybody again shortly. And thank you very much. And have a good school year ahead of us, everybody. And we'll see you soon.
Take care.
Okay. Thank you very much, everybody. Goodbye.